good. I mean, it's all she already got it on her computer, so they wanted to ask her how to, yeah. So they just want to know how to
Okay.
yeah. But it's all these, nothing you have to do.
We're just gonna say.
we'll move forward with the public meeting for Z-2019-005, the HMG Holdings MacCrimmon Johnston / ZanderPlan 51, 53, and 55 Front Street, Rockport. Before we get started this evening, I'd like to read just a general overview of how the public meeting will go and expectations of behavior from both council and the public. So, thank you everyone for coming to participate in tonight's public meeting. Public meetings are an important part of the process as it allows both the applicant and the potential affected neighbors and community to voice any concerns they may have or to support the applicant. We ask that all people in attendance this evening sign in so that we have correct spelling and contact information for further information going forward. Please be advised that everyone has a right to speak this evening, but also be advised that there's an expectation of behavior and decorum. When you're acknowledged by the chair and asked to come to the podium, please state your name for the record and state your support or concerns clearly and concisely to a maximum of 5 minutes. It is our, it is our hope that all who wish to speak may have a chance to do so. Having said this, there is no opportunity for debate of statements or concerns. The public meeting is a forum for the applicant to state their goal of a successful application, and for those who have concerns or questions can pose those to the planning staff who will request further information from the applicant. Staff will report back to council before we will be proceeding with the debate / approval. We appreciate everybody's cooperation and commitment to this process. So now that I've said that, I will call upon the assistant planner to begin the proceedings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So before us today, we have an application for a zoning amendment to property known as ADJOURNMENT Marine. So there are a number of components to the zoning amendment. However, the primary reason for the zoning amendment is that the current zoning of the property, which is tourist commercial, does not allow for any residential use on the property. The applicants are proposing to have 40 condominium units on the property in 5 3-story buildings. A maximum height increase is requested from 12 meters to 15 meters. They're proposing a reduction of the number of required parking spaces from 274 spaces to 226 spaces. Due to the configuration of the property, a number of reductions in the 30-meter water setback are proposed for the 5 condo buildings, as well as for a separate amenity building and a swimming pool. And as part of the proposal, the marina is to be expanded as well to a total of 160 boat slips. There are currently approximately 140 boat slips on the property. The zoning amendment is required for the proposal to permit this. The project will also be subject to site plan control. In terms of applicable policy, the existing tourist commercial zone does not permit residential use. The township's new official plan contemplates residential uses and multi-residential uses on a tourist commercial property. We received public comment up to this meeting today. They've all been circulated to you as members of council. The health unit also submitted comments. They didn't have any objection or comment really on the application, as the septic system that's to be servicing this development. The approval for that is through the Ministry of Environment, as the daily flow for this development will be over 10,000 liters a day. The Conservation Authority also submitted comment on the zoning amendment. In principle, they have stated that they do not have objection. However, there are a number of items that will still have to be addressed prior to approval of the zoning amendment. And the applicants are aware of this, and us in the CIC will be working on that with them. So at this point, the applicant has a presentation to go over the development.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chairman, Council, thank you for giving us this audience today. And I thought maybe what we could do is just a very quick brief history as to the reason we're here. For the last 26 years, myself and my wife Heather Huck and her sister and brother-in-law Peter have run the marina. And just as the generations before her, for 130 years, they ran a marina and a site that welcomed guests to the area. Her grandmother had a lodge on the existing site, 10 cabins, and had been in the hospitality business right up through the 70s and 80s. A couple of years ago, there was a change of ownership structure, and my partner of 26 years, Peter, retired, and 2 new individuals, Mark Dalton, who's here tonight, and Nathan Sheaf, joined in. And we began discussing some of the future purposes of Ed Huck Marine and really the evolution of what has been a marina and hospitality area to something that's better than what was there. The infrastructure that was at the marina was growing old. It was 50, 60 years old, 130 years old, but the buildings were starting to look industrial. And there's a bunch of renderings around the room that show you what was and the beginning of what is. We've just constructed a building on site that everybody's familiar with. The option really is to go through these slides and then if there's questions, and there was several emails sent in to us and to the township over the last couple of days, and our hope is to be able to address a few of those questions, and specifically around water and septic and some of the other issues that have been raised. So if we go through some of the slides, you can see what the marina was and what we're proposing. It brings together 3 different properties that are all adjoining into one property. The marina continues on pretty much in its current state with some pretty serious improvements to the infrastructure, some big investments. There is a proposal for 16 new slips, which would be less than 10%, roughly 10% of the slips that exist now. As you can see on the slides, there's a building that's been constructed called the Johnston building in the center of the property. And this fall, we will renovate the building that's on the water, that the high water took part of 2 years ago. And our intention is to rebuild and create a more aesthetically pleasing look. The pier will have interlocking placed through and replace all the gravel and what was pavement. So again, aesthetically, the marina is going to become a lot more pleasing than what was there over the last few years. To the west, you can see what we'll call the first series of the development proposal, and it is 3 units with 3 buildings with 8 units each, 3 floors high. Next slide. That's the same rendering from a different angle, looking at it from the northwest. The building in the center of the property has been constructed, and it's complete. And again, to the right, you'll see the rendering of the 3 buildings proposed, and then phase 2 would be the 2 buildings just to the lower left-hand side of the screen. You'll also notice that from what is there today, which is essentially almost all gravel or asphalt, the new development will encompass a lot more greenscape, trees, landscaping, and again, I refer to the renderings here around the room that show what Ed Huck Marine looked like 2 years ago and what it's going to look like in a few years. Next slide. That's the back basin, and it depicts where there's a residential home right now. We would put 2 of those units and upgrade the boardwalk and so on. Next slide. That's a close-up of what the units will look like. Again, 3, and then 2 units on the top, total of 8. The roof lines too, part of the application is for a little bit more height, and that allows us to create the gabled roofs and some of the structures that are aesthetically more pleasing. If we conform to the current height, then we're going to end up with more of a flat roof structure, which really isn't as aesthetically pleasing. Next slide. Again, similar views of the same units. That building is going to be renovated starting this fall. That's currently the blue building that sits on the water, and that's from the parking lot view. We're going to put a peak on the front of it, and it will encompass a showroom for Sea-Doos and administration offices and so on. We've also upgraded and built new gas docks out front, but they're all underwater right now. But you'll see that maybe in the next view. And there's the view now that what would be the approach to Huck's. And again, if you refer to what's there now versus what we're about to build, I think there'd be no argument that that's a lot nicer to look at from the water than what's currently there. Next view. That's the building we just completed. That's the Johnston building, and it encompasses a showroom, boaters' heads, a gym, yoga studio, and a new laundromat. And I think if you look at some of the renderings again on the wall, some of the proposals we had a year or 2 ago, it's shown what that was to be, and the end product actually ended up surpassing what we had proposed. So you can see that it's the architecture and the design of the building is river and it fits with the village. Next slide. And that's a proposed gazebo area, an open air gazebo area that we put in an application for. Next slide. So in this case, we're looking at the front of the marina as it currently sits, and the blue building, which will be turned into the images that you see to the right and below. And there's the rendering we're talking about. So if we look at what was on site 2 years ago, we had a large 50-year-old steel industrial building sitting in the middle of the yard, and it's transformed into the images that you see above. I think one of the main distinctions too is that we're going to move most of the operations that are a working boatyard, boats being serviced and so on, away from the waterfront, and that's going to occur at our other facility. And you're going to be left with a resort type atmosphere with trees, a lot more greenscape, and something that I think anybody would agree. When you look at the east end of Rockport, it's going to be a lot more pleasing than what's been there for the last few years. And that's the slide. So again, I think today's process is to maybe hear from some of the people that have some very legitimate, intelligent questions about how this may affect them, and we should have the answers for some of those folks. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. MacCrimmon. Would anybody like to come to the podium and voice any questions or concerns in regards to this development? Please come forward. Just a reminder, please state your name and before you begin so we can have you. Thank you.
My name is Jack Sturkin. I live on 63 Burgess Lane, and we also own Hog Island in Halstead Bay. So we have two properties in this township. Aesthetically pleasing, he mentioned. I live one lot away from the river. Aesthetically pleasing is the river, not a roof line. Okay. So that's just something that I was just thinking of now. I have a whole lot of questions. We had submitted some observations, but the CRCA did, I think, a pretty fair job of pointing out some of the nature of some of the problems that we see with this particular property. Okay. I think it is representative of overdevelopment, which Rockport is already suffering from severely, given what has happened with the doubling of the capacity of the boat line, the number of buses, although this year is not as bad as other years, and now an increase in the capacity and the population that is serviced on that particular property. Parking is an incredible problem throughout Rockport. If you go there any time of the week, any green space on the riverside of the main street is covered with cars. Okay, all the lawns are covered with cars. The road, which in our case is Burgess Lane, doesn't have the capacity to deal with heavy traffic. We get a lot of heavy traffic, especially now that the service is being done on the parkway. The boats are being moved back and forth on big trucks, heavy trucks. And on a regular basis, hydro is required to help facilitate the boats going through past our house. On many occasions, our electricity is in fact cut off. Okay. Now, I have questions. There was mention of seasonal occupancy. I have never heard of such a definition. Is there a legal definition? How is it enforced? What is seasonal occupancy? Are people going to move out at a certain date and not move back in until the spring or something like that? That's what seems to be implied to me, but I've not been able to find any sort of legal definition that either describes it or lays out how that can be enforced. Okay. So I think it's a word that should not even be used. There is no survey of the property in any of the submissions by the company.
And it turns out it's not one property, but I think 3 properties that would need to be combined for this project. And I went through the process of getting a zoning change in this township, and I tell you, it's not easy. I had to go through a lot of hoops. I had to follow a lot of regulations that seem to be, that they seem to want an exemption of. If you have an official plan and you ask for at least 7 exemptions, what's the point of having an official plan? To raise the roof by 3 meters because it's aesthetically more pleasing, I'm sorry. Not to me it isn't. It's blocking my view. Okay. And that, in a nutshell, is sort of part of the problem that confronts Rockport as a community. The overdevelopment and the increasing capacity of boat line, and now the marina puts heavy pressure on everything that's in the community. There is no parking. It is not safe to walk down the road. There's no sidewalk, and so on. The road is not designed to carry the weight that it is currently carrying. So significant capital improvements are going to have to be needed on the township infrastructure in order to realistically face the burden that the infrastructure is going to have to carry. Okay. So the additional height, what is a loft? They described the additional height was asked for because they wanted to put in a loft. What's the use of the loft? Is it going to be another apartment? Or is it just going to be empty space? Okay. How relevant is the EIS study? Well, the CRCA has already addressed that in many respects. One site visit in the fall, the late fall, really doesn't do it, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of looking at the implications. The wave rush study somehow manages not to make any mention of 2017 or this year. Okay. There's no mention of it. I've been a consultant for 40 years. I'd be ashamed to submit something like that. And to me, it has no credibility. The CRCA also seriously questioned some of their observations and conclusions. There is no hard data on the aquifer which will have to serve this building. Okay. There's a reference to a stressed aquifer. Many people ran out of water the last time there was a drought. Okay. It will be required to service 40 residential units, and the figures you're given are about the 40 residential units. But what about the need of the 160 boats that are there? Their gray water, their sewage, etc. Where's that going? I didn't see any mention of any septic tanks for pump out or anything like that for them. Okay. The vast majority of parking spots are in the floodplain. In fact, the vast majority are on the pier. Any spill, any leakage cannot be ameliorated or avoided. You cannot avoid that that's going to wind up in the river. I do not believe for a minute there should be parking spots on that pier, and if you don't have them, you have a serious problem with this project. Okay. I'm a Dutchman, so when you learn to drive in Holland, one of the things you learn is how to escape out of a car when it sinks. Because in Amsterdam, people were driving regularly into the river. Okay. Well, I can guarantee you this will probably happen here. Okay. And I don't think anybody here knows how to get out of a sinking car. So fuel spills and stuff like that, and leakage from cars, people carrying their supplies to the boats, all that stuff, you cannot ameliorate it because it's right on the water. Okay. 2 more. Docking has already seriously encroached on the PWS, Grenadier PWS,
The environmental study didn't mention the fact that most of the docks on the north side are in extremely shallow water, especially in the fall. Every time a prop starts spinning, the sediment is disturbed. And I can promise you the sediment there is probably severely compromised, okay, for the 130 years of fuel spills, etc. Okay. So every time the prop turns, aquatic plants are destroyed if they were there, and you know, all kinds of chemicals and everything and residual stuff floats down the river. Finally, okay, I mentioned there was no reference to what's happening to sewage and grey water waste produced by the occupants of the existing and newly proposed 160 dock sites. Finally, will the developer be required to pay for improvements in access to the property from Front Street to the Thousand Island Parkway? Because, frankly, as a taxpayer, I don't really want to pay for this. Okay? The other thing is parking. Can't stress this enough. This represents overdevelopment again. Parking is not available anywhere in Rockport, and for them to ask for an exemption of the required parking spots in accordance to the official plan is an absolute no-no. Okay. In fact, many of the parking spots are highly questionable, and I think, given the CRCA conditions that are said there, a lot of them will not qualify as parking spots. Okay. So I would suggest, if you're going to do something and make it aesthetically pleasing, limit it to 3 buildings. And do not allow any expansion of dock space. If you want to put in new docks, take out old docks, preferably on the north side. Okay. So that would be my suggestion in terms of what might be possible. I think, you know, it would be very nice to have an aesthetically pleasing place there. It was ugly. The new building is an improvement. But 6 condos on that little piece of land is too much. There is no space. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sturgeon. Anybody else? Would anybody else like to approach the podium to make comments, please? Okay. Any of the councillors, do you have any questions for the development and developers, please? So, Councillor Durrell, Councillor Maybe, Councillor Lackey. I'll just make a quick comment. I will probably be relinquishing the chair around 6 o'clock. I have another commitment that I'm going to try to make, and I apologize to the gallery. It was made in advance, well in advance, and I will return for the council meeting. I'm in and out literally for 20 minutes. So again, my apologies to the gallery and to the applicants this evening. Councillor Gore.
Thank you, and through you, your worship. There are a myriad of questions that come to my mind, and I'm going to just try and be as succinct as I can here. Number one, what we're looking at here is really a massing of 3 properties. They're asking for the marina exemption, which would allow for a resort to be built with a certain number of condominiums. That, I think, where the seasonality came from has been very, very confusing to all of us. I'm not sure, it doesn't bear any, to my mind, I haven't found anything in any act or anything else, or the building codes or anything that it's relevant. So it spawned a lot of questions in my mind. And what I come up with is, you're going to end up with condominiums in a very complex condominium act that is going to be probably leasehold condominiums and all the rules that apply. It still doesn't mean they're seasonal. So I thought that when this was brought up initially, I always thought that the people of Rockport and so on were supportive generally, and they thought, oh, what a great idea, we're going to have some real housing. And therefore, I think a lot of questions came up when the seasonality issue came up, but I think that's worth bearing in mind, the big picture there. But I do have other questions. One, does this variance, and this was brought up by one of my constituents, any variation here in my mind does not become common law. I believe that's in the Planning Act, that when you get a variation, it is it's specific to that site. It does not carry on. Because when I look at the application, I'm not sure, Tom, whether your application is printed correctly, in 11.1, it says tourist commercial exception, TC4. So far, there's no such thing that I've ever read. So I'm not sure if that's a misprint or something else. At any rate, my point being, I would want to make sure that there are other CT4 areas in Rockport, and we have to make sure that that didn't carry over necessarily. And last and least, or lastly, is this project scalable? In other words, if people are feeling that it's too much density, too much whatever, are the designers and owners of this property willing to have a conversation about reduction of the density? There's a lot of different ways that property could be developed, and I give them credit for what I've seen. It's awesome. But is it too much? And I think that this council could view that. My last point, and please bear with me, they are asking for 7, I believe, or 6 variations on this zoning. My belief is that perhaps we should split that. That why don't we just deal with the massing of the property and the concept of buildings? Why do we have to get into the waterfront setbacks and everything in this? They're swinging for the fences here. And is that a bad thing? I'm not sure. They're swinging for the fences on the first pitch. So is there room for give and take here? They put a lot of effort into this and spent a fortune, I'm sure, on these studies and this stuff. But I would like to understand whether there is any possibility of scalability at this time. Thank you very much.
Questions, concerns, duly noted. Councilor Lee?
Just a couple things come to mind. Is the water right that we've had this year and 2 years ago, has there been any consideration to mitigate that happening? Because it's likely going to happen again. So during your development and construction of this site, is that being considered by possibly raising the ground or some of the area around it to help, as well as mitigate any leaks from sewer, water, gasoline, oils, anything else that could be put on that property? Alluded to possible car parking on the pier. Is there any mitigation to contain any of those contaminants that may get there? And does any of the recent or current plan infringe any more on the wetlands than the current property actually has? I know there was some talk about the silt base possibly being stirred up, but does that actually get into that kind of bailiwick also?
Deputy Mayor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to our planning department. I'm more concerned with the last page of the report with CRCA. It looks like we've covered a lot of items off. We're looking at 1, 2, 4, 9, and 10. I'm wondering if we've gone further to accomplish those items, as well as what the discussions were of the aquifer for the drinking water, and if there's any way to, I won't say mitigate, but if there's a way that should something arise due to drilling, blasting, is there a way to make sure that the neighboring properties don't lose their drinking water? I mean, that's the one of the number one things in this country is that we have safe, potable drinking water. And I'm wondering also at 6.5 acres roughly, where we're at with lot coverage.
Mr. Assistant Planner, and if you can address some of the concerns the council and the public have brought up, what you can, and then refer to the applicants if need be.
Sure. So on the CRCA comments, the CRCA sent these out on Friday, rather. They were sent directly to the applicants, so the applicants are certainly aware of what the CRCA is requiring prior to them recommending approval of the zoning amendment. So us and the CRCA will certainly be working with the applicants to address those. On the drinking water, I'll touch on that briefly, and then I'll ask the applicant to speak further to that. But there was a servicing report and stormwater report that was submitted with the application. There were a number of wells that were drilled on site, and my understanding, I'm not sure who wants to address it from the Mark.
Yeah.
You don't go into this right now, do you here?
Just the water or?
Yeah.
So right now the site has 4 wells on it. We hired a water engineer out of Kingston just recently who to help us with the Johnston building we just built and make sure that the water supply was brought up to par and proper cleaning, chlorination and such. So they did some volume and testing on the current wells. We currently have 4 wells, and with the analysis that they put forward and the engineers provided for usage, we're actually going down a well. In fact, that well that we're going down has already been removed in coordination with the Ministry of Environment. So there is a well that was about 20 feet off the waterfront next to the building that we're renovating this fall. That well has been capped and removed. So we actually don't need any new wells on the property. There is the option to do a supply test and draw water from the river and then do a chlorination water system. But right now, that was not the need. What we actually did this year is we put in the new building, we put in a full raw water system. So there's a pump in the new building that is drawing water from the river. And if you come to the marina now, you'll actually see new stanchions around the docks going in that are all marked raw water so that our boaters wash their boats with raw water instead of fresh water to help reduce the amount of water that's needed in the marina. But at this point, when we started off, we thought we'd be drawing water from the river, and that's an MOE process. And after we did the calculations on the well, there's no need for that. The current wells, the use is actually quite low in today's day and age with the toilets and showers all being so limited in volumes and such like that. So that's the situation on water. But a formal study can be done, as you know, and requested as part of a condition to zoning.
Thank you. And sorry, switch chairs here, but I appreciate that answer. But how do we know the effect on the neighbors? Are we testing their wells, their capacities?
So that's what the study would do if it's felt like it's needed. So just to back up a little bit, I know we were talking about, this is the first sort of kick of the can. In actual fact, we've been working on this project in depth with the consultants, the town, the MOE, Conservation Authority for just about 2 years now, maybe 2.5 years. This is the Conservation's letter that they wrote last Thursday is actually our third plan, second one formally submitted. We can share them with everybody if they want, so you can see how this project actually did evolve. This was far from the first shot. When we started with the Conservation Authority, we actually didn't have stormwater management control. We were told that the development in the area would only didn't require quantity or quality because of the existing marina facility. Conservation Authority moved that to the pier, that the pier is an existing marina facility, and that the rest of the property they wanted to be treated as greenfield, meaning it has to work and be designed to meet all of the current standards. So I think it's an 80% or whatever, but basically the site is being developed. If you pulled up one of the maps, the 2 units in the parking lot to the north are actually being raised slightly to allow for storm sewers, storm scepters, oil and grease interceptors, so that anything basically west of the Johnston building, which is considered a new development versus the original marina just getting renovated, it is completely 100% protected by new storm sewers and grease interceptors and oil and grit and what's called, so we have quality control and quantity control into the river. And the only exception is a small little parking lot right by the existing boat launch. And that is only, and you can read it in their report, that is an existing parking lot that Conservation Authority, we actually originally had proposed to take out the boat launch, thinking that would be a good thing to have one less boat launch where vehicles are getting backed in, but the Conservation Authority does not want the boat launch removed because the boat launch is a natural flooding plain, and if you remove the boat launch, then we're taking away some of the flood area. So that's the only little parking lot in the green field that is an existing sort of entrance to the boat launch that they've left. So, as far as your question about water though, so the engineers are working through that, and that's so far through the 2 years that we've been involved with Conservation Authority and the county and the township, having one of those reports done hasn't been requested, but it wouldn't be abnormal to have one done if it was a desire as a condition.
Thank you. Tom, did you have a comment? And then Councilor Navy, Councilor Oki. Yeah, just continuing on with what I was discussing. So that study is a hydro-G study. It basically assesses the capacity of the water on site, and that can be requested to be done prior to zoning. My correction was what is to be done prior to site plan approval. This development will be subject to site plan, which will implement any conditions that are recommended through any of the studies that were submitted, specifically to stormwater management. And I'm not sure if there's any blasting to be done, but require a complete pre-blast survey to be completed, so there's no impacts to groundwater. To your lot coverage question, I don't know the exact number we're at right now because it wasn't over, so it's not part of the zoning amendment. Councillor, maybe your question about the height of the water. So one of the studies that was submitted with this application is called a wave uprush analysis, and that basically establishes where the floodplain actually is. And all of the buildings are proposed to comply with the setback that is required from the floodplain. And just due to the events we've seen, and also that's establishing the principle of development on the site, that study is also being peer reviewed by an external consultant. So there's kind of a double review going on with respect to the floodplain. Councilor Mayne?
Further the question, thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. The wells, when they're drilled, there's usually a gallon per hour that's already on them. And since you lost one well, you're down to 3. Do you have a cumulative effort by all 3 wells?
I don't have those numbers with me, but yeah, they were the company that came in and the water engineer at Kingston that came in, they did a water supply gallons per minute. The one that's on there's one well right now that's running the new Johnston building, the building on the water, and all of the docks, and it had a volume of about 112 gallons per minute, which is more than we can actually pump through a pipe, and about, I think they said it was about 9 times the amount of water we actually needed in that one well. So that's why we shut down the other well that was questionable by the MOE. It was a very, very old well on the edge of the water. So we had that one removed and capped and decommissioned.
Go ahead. And just follow up, during the proposed construction, the blasting that it would take for some areas, will you monitor the well to make sure that its capacity is still at the rate that it's listed at?
Exactly. So during blasting processes, so there's a pre-blast survey done on all the properties, water, wells, their sensors, seismic sensors put on properties, including wells and the ground. And during a blasting process, those are all measured, and then a post-survey can be done to make sure that there's nothing that's been affected, and if so, it has to be corrected, and there's insurance in place, of course, for that. I actually am a builder by trade for 33 years in the city of Ottawa. We blast regularly in downtown Ottawa, 6 inches from buildings. It's not like it used to be where it's a very, very engineered science now. I will say on this site, the blasting is extremely minimal. Because the CRCA wants us to raise some of the areas to allow for sewers and underground services for the quality control. The only area that really will need a bit of blasting is the last section of our underground sanitary line to the new Terra sewage system that's proposed. So it's a very limited amount, and it might even be able to be hammered. It's just we know the rock in this area is very, very hard. But in general, like the condos up on Front Street, there is no blasting to do. The other 3 condos, I don't think there'll be any blasting to do, except maybe one corner right near the new Terra again. But in general, you know, we've done testing, geotechnical engineers, drills, drill tests, core tests, water sample tests. So we have a good idea where the rocks are. There's not that much blasting, and it may be able to be O-rammed. The only exception, I would say, is the tank that goes below the new Terra system.
Thank you. Councillor Oldie and then Councillor Foot.
There was that, can I answer that question about water levels though?
Sure.
You'd asked about the 2017, 2019 water levels. So during the working with the Conservation Authority to get a building permit to renovate the Johnston building and the new sales building, which we have in hand, one building's complete. The building was raised 450 mils, which was 400 mils above the 100-year floodplain. So that was to take into effect any of the additional unknowns that the recent water levels have had. And I would say that even this year with the high water, the new building that was built, we're 3 steps, so 3/8. We're 24 inches away from that water at our floor level. So the Conservation Authority, even in their new report, talks about the elevation being, I think in the residence, 400 millimeters above, so 16 inches above the 100-year plane, and the rest of our buildings are 12 inches or 16 inches, sorry, 14 inches. Yeah, 350 mils.
Thank you for that. Maybe you could send us a letter of support through a couple of motions that are coming tonight with the regards to the 2014 plan, if you have it. So I'll look forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
Councillor Wilkie, wish to comment, and then Councillor Bodie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you. I think I heard an answer somewhere in there about assessing the effect on neighboring wells. Now, my observation is your descriptions are quite brilliant, but you're putting this thing almost in an isolated bubble. And whether it's positive or whether it's negative, and that'll only be determined over time by your neighbors, if this is a positive development. You've described a bubble of engineering brilliance, I agree, but you're still plunked in the middle of a community that I don't think is quite ready for you. I'd like to hear clearly what you want to do to assure the wells of your neighbors. And subsequent to that, a little bit about traffic planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkie and Councillor Bodie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and to the Speaker. A lot of my questions have been answered, which is fine. Do you know the depth of the current aquifer?
There's more than one. I could get them for you for sure.
Range?
Sorry? 160 feet is the well depth, but the aquifer is about that, right?
Okay. And with that in mind, I mean, the density of the project, which has been touched on by a number of people for different reasons, including Mr. Strickland, it has been touched here a minute ago as well as blasting. How much subsurface disturbance is planned in this whole development?
So other than the sanitary trench over to the new Terra, that's about it. The founding elevation of all these condos would be dug to rock because there's no basements because of the river. So the intention is they're going to rock more of a hazard erosion control protection, so they're not sitting up on earth, let's say. So all of the condos are proposed just to sit on rock, but not enter the rock because we're above. Finished floor level is above existing rock.
Okay, that'll satisfy me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. Wish to comment?
Through Deputy Mayor, to planning staff, and it moves to another subject. Taking the general situation of Rockport, is the planning staff planning to incorporate this application and as it studies the general situation in Rockport with respect to all the other things that have been raised in Rockport about congestion of buses and everything else, is that being incorporated into the study that is being done, 1, and 2, will that include what the township would need to do for this particular application along with the other challenges with respect to how the roads, the township manages its road, repairs its roads, and prepares its roads for such impacts?
Just to clarify your question, is whether this application will inform the study that's proposed to occur? So the township is undertaking a traffic count of Rockport, and that will inform us a kind of strategic study of Rockport. So this information can be provided to the consultant that's doing them. However, my understanding is that this development will not significantly increase the number of trips to the site, as there are already a number, I think 140 boat slips on site. There's 40 condos proposed. However, it's natural to assume that condo owners will also be boat slip owners, so the increase is anticipated to be significant in terms of additional traffic volume.
So can I share a few things on that? So we currently actually have it 144 slips to 160 slips, because there are a few that get removed in this proposal. I wanted to just talk about your water though and sewage again, and I just want to remind people that we're building, we're proposing to build 40 new condos that brings 40 new taxpayers who also want to be happy with their water and their sewage system. So we would not be building something subpar to leave our customers in a spot where they also don't have proper water or proper sewage facility. The sewage facility, if I can touch on it, is proposed by Newterra. We've been working with them for 2 years as well. The MOE, it's kind of their absolute Cadillac system and proposed system. It's in use in the area now. The water that comes out of the Newterra system is essentially drinking water. The MOE's been working on the application supporting the proposed versus any sort of septic system. And we've done some water testing over the winter that's just being finalized. But the sewage system, it's heavily regulated by the MOE, obviously, and designed by the consulting engineers who are not under any conflict to try to make a system fail for our own customers. We obviously want them to be happy. We don't want 15 people to move in and have that issue. We also want the people of Rockport to be happy. Scott and his family have been in there, and Morris Huck is next door. And the Hucks have really been around this area for a long, long time. And there's no way, knowing Scott and his family, and by the way, Nathan and I, who are the new partners, are also landowners and boaters of the Thousand Islands for 20 plus years. So we came in no way to try to pull anything down or give anybody a bad well or leave them in a bad condition. Like I said, I've been a builder for 30 years, and I believe that heavily that growing my businesses, it's all about making sure the people around you are impacted in a positive way. And I know that if there truly was an issue down the road, we'd carry insurance for that. They would be protected, and we would make sure that they were taken care of if a well went dry because of our development. But it's certainly not something that we can talk about the details today, because you're right, it's later. But that's my thing on sewage. On the parking and traffic, if I can talk about that, Tom's exactly right. Majority of the people who have come to us about these condos are actually boat owners who would like to have a day boat at the marina. And I would say about 80% of our marina, maybe 75, is more day boating and island owners. So many of the people who have shown interest in buying a condo have a boat already there. So we're not anticipating 40 new families. We're actually anticipating the majority of our customers of the condos to be people who already have boats there and want to have a summer home or a full year home. They can have whatever they want, and I'll address the seasonal thing in a minute. So we don't anticipate a whole bunch of new traffic at all. We have a list of people who are on the list that would like to buy a condo, and a far majority of that list are people who have a day boat, would like to come from wherever they come from and spend the night on the river and go day boating tomorrow, and spend the night in the river and go day boating the next day. So we don't anticipate huge needs or huge increases on traffic or actual people. It's just a second recreational type facility for them. To address your comment about seasonality, I think that was really confusion from day one. We shared that we believed that the buyers of these condos would be seasonal type people. That exists in every community. I live in a building in Ottawa, and a number of my neighbors leave in the winter and go to the south for 6 months it's not a seasonal home, it's a full season. We just believe that the facility being in Rockport, being in the Thousand Islands, that the majority of the users would be seasonal type users. It was never thought that it was, you know, a restricted seasonal place. And the MOE new terrace system is being designed for its peak use, which is the summertime, obviously. So it will run all year round, because our marina is open all year round, and the systems will run year round. We just don't expect that all 40 owners are going to actually live there 12 months of the year. On the parking, our first plan when we actually came to the very first meeting almost a year and a half ago, after we worked for about 8 or 9 months in the plan, we actually exceeded our parking requirement. I understand, I've been in the Rockport area for 20 some years, and I certainly see the parking on the grass and the lineups of cars. I can say from being a customer at the marina, I always park on the marina property. Always have, always will, and we intend to continue that. The request for less parking actually came from a mixture of the town and the last people that were involved, and the Conservation Authority to have more green space, because there is no real weekend that everybody comes to their boat. So there also is the same reality that a person who has a condo likely has a boat. And the current zoning, and you can help me, I think it's 1.5 or 1.25 per condo, is that right? Something currently, 1.5? 1.5 parking spots per condo and 1 spot for every boat slip. So it's a very high number, and we've always managed our parking on the property. We still intend to manage our parking on the property. And really, if council wanted us to meet the parking we could. The current plan wasn't the swing of the cat, it actually was a negotiated of, you know what, let's look at this in a real way. It's a marina, not everybody comes every day. You do have a spot for every single slip and every single condo on the count that we're requesting. So we definitely don't anticipate unloading Rockport with more parking problems up and down the road. We'll manage our parking on our site. We also have the ability on a busy weekend to move some of our own staff parking to our other property up the parkway, if we had to. So we've thought about that, and the parking was not just a request for us so that we could build more and try to make more money. It actually was a managed approach about how do we bring more green space. In fact, if you go to the Johnston building we built this year, unfortunately due to the high water it's not all done, but if you go to the east side, you're going to see nice planters and new trees planted already. Lots of shrubs and greenery that has never existed east of any of those buildings. We really believe that we need to bring a lot of green and landscape back to the area to take us away from a working kind of shipyard, boatyard, to a resort where people enjoy and in the best environmentally friendly way possible the waterways. The setbacks, if I can just talk about the setbacks for a minute. The setbacks, again, were not us asking for that setback. Our first plan, we actually maintained the 30 meters on the riverfront. On the basin, we didn't maintain 30 meters, and I believe the OP actually says 30 meters where it's possible. In that particular position, you'd actually be out on the road. So the 17.5 meter setback actually came from the Conservation Authority. And that was because of a discussion around parking. So right now, if we maintain 30 meters on those buildings on the waterfront, then our parking would be on the waterfront side of those buildings. And that's not a desire to boat up and down the river, and there are many places in different parts of the river through Gananoque to Brockville where you see parking between the building and the river. So conservation's guidelines actually show 17.5 meters. Yes, the town was 30 meters, but the sort of negotiation between town and Conservation Authority was we'd rather see condos on the water and parking behind than the other way around. And I believe the EIS and Conservation Authority, even the report on Friday, are in favor of that. So that's just a little bit, but it wasn't us, trying to push condos out to the water and take advantage of the OP. It was actually 2 years of working with the authorities to come up with this plan. The height we did talk about, again, I think there was a conversation about the lofts. We brought in the sloped roofs to try to maintain some of the looks around the river and not have a sort of contemporary flat roof building. And then once we actually put those sloped roofs in, The loft is actually just a sitting room type thing over top of the living room to enjoy the views, strictly because of the peaked roof, not because of any other reason. So no, it's just space, really. It's just a sitting room that looks out over the water. I talked about traffic and the blasting, so I think that's all the items that I kind of heard.
That's very good. I appreciate the detail of your answer to the issues. Just a couple things before we wrap up. We have to start a council meeting at 6:30. I apologize. I didn't get your name for the minutes.
Oh, it's Mark Knoll.
Thank you. I'd like to give the public one more opportunity to ask questions or to speak at this point. We've got roughly 6-7 minutes, so when I see a hand up back there, Wendy. I'm not going to make you state your name.
You don't know my name? Mine is just a comment about the rest of Rockport and all this worry about traffic and everything. One of the things that a lot of people who've come here for years and years and years like is the quaintness of the village. And expanding the roads and putting in sidewalks is not the answer to keeping the charm of Rockport. So whatever the parking issues are, the rest of Rockport doesn't need to have roads widened and sidewalks put in. The charm of Rockport is being a village, a quaint village, and you've lowered the speed limit, which is good. People can walk on the roads and cars can drive on the roads, and we don't need to be making it a wider passageway. So whatever the planning is going on for the rest of Rockport, and I really would like you to note that. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Wait for the speak. Councillor Grell, did you have a last comment?
Yeah, thank you, and through you, the Deputy Mayor. Number 7 in the list of items was the dock, asking for expanded dockage. I have a question. Is this township really required to answer that? Hasn't this come up before in previous councils? And so my question is, I guess to the planning department, is this a floating dock? Because my understanding is floating docks do not, I have documentation here, do not fall under any requirement of rezoning. They're not even considered attached to the mainland, and I could quote you where I got that. So I'm not sure that we can't just eliminate that item in terms of dockage. That's a whole other organization that would deal with that, not the township. That's a thought.
Do you want to bring that back to council later, or do you want to speak to that now?
Currently, yeah, the township zoning bylaw applies to all land in the township, even land with water, so any type of dock or boathouse does require to conform with the zoning bylaw.
Thank you. I was told there were a couple more hands in the audience. Someone didn't speak, please come up.
Marjorie Cromwell, 35 Front Street. My question was just about these additional docks, so I'm not really sure if I can ask this question or not, but I just noticed on this plan where these new docks are going. And I mean, they're already halfway to Tar Island, so I don't know if this is going to go a little farther out there, but I know it's certainly blocked my view down the east with the new docks they currently have. And more bigger boats means more bigger wakes that are taking out my dock. So that was one of my concerns. The other concern I have is would any of these be Airbnb? Any of these condos be Airbnb? And one more additional question might be the thought about fire trucks. Will we need additional ladders or whatever for the condos, for the fire truck?
Ms. Cromwell, I think I can answer that for you.
Okay.
Our bylaws and our official plans and everything we have, you can't build over a certain weight because we don't have a ladder truck. So that should look after that part of it.
Okay, thanks.
Was there someone else in the public who would like to speak? We've got about 2 minutes.
Councillor Foley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It was only touched on once by the original speaker, but I think one, and I haven't made a decision one way or the other, but when I read this whole documentation that was presented to us in the last few days of the week, part I take away from this that I like the most, we're moving a lightweight industrial business away from the water and trading it off for housing. That sits well in my books.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. I'm just going to finish off with a comment, the fact that this particular agenda for a public meeting was 271 pages. It's a lot of information to digest in a short amount of time. I don't know about anybody else around the table, but I'm not finished with it, and I think what I've seen is fantastic information. And I think as your current council, we will do our best to look at all the information that we've been provided. We'll look at CRCA comments, and we'll try to come up with the best solution that we can for everyone involved. I appreciate all the time that was, and the money that was put into these studies, the environmental assessments, the cataract conservation obviously has put tremendous effort into this, so I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Your information has been duly recorded, and I think all those involved have listened. So we will come back to you with a plan. Thank you very much for coming. If there's no other comments, I have a motion moved by Councilor Mamie, seconded by Councilor Foley, that the public meeting adjourned. All those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
If anyone has not signed the sign-in sheet here for the public meeting, please come and do so. For anybody that's staying for the council meeting, we're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you very much. You answered a lot of questions, Scott.
Online now, or so in the beginning, we actually changed the sign.